Hey, City Light. We had some audio problems with the recording, and so this teaching has lost the first 5 minutes, but most of the teaching is there. And so I want to just give you this brief introduction, or else the rest of it might not make that much sense. So we are giving the last teaching in the relationship series, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And Mandy and I are teaching together on the topic of forgiveness. And the way we started was by sharing a story of a time when I hurt her feelings. So I was not present enough in a conversation. I made her feel excluded from the conversation. I interrupted her several times. And so we had to work through that. And we share that story at the beginning because the rest of the teaching is kind of based on this model of me being the person asking for forgiveness and her being the person needing to give forgiveness. So that's why the introduction was kind of important, because we go back and forth. So first we address obstacles to me asking for forgiveness, so the obstacles I face, and then the obstacles she faces giving forgiveness, right? And then the second point, we're going to talk about how I can ask for forgiveness, and she's going to talk about how she can give forgiveness. And then at the end, we'll talk about next steps for me as someone who has been forgiven, and for her as someone who has offered forgiveness, and also talk a little bit about what to do when you have kind of repeat offenses. So that's the introduction that we went through that I thought would be important for you to hear before you listen to the rest of the teaching, but we didn't want you to miss since we got the majority of it recorded. So I hope this teaching is helpful and hopeful for you, and that you can use it in your relationships, your everyday relationships, whether it's marriage or kids or with your parents or with friends or coworkers or family members. We're always in situations where we may need to either ask for forgiveness or give forgiveness or both. And so hopefully this will be helpful for you.
Psalm 139 says, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me." It's a dangerous prayer, isn't it? "Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." There's something powerful about asking God to search for your imperfections, to search for the things in you that are not holy and righteous and good. And so when I am confronted with, maybe she says, "Hey, you kind of cut me out of the conversation. You were interrupting. You made me feel like this." I can tend to react in three negative ways. The first one is blindness. So I don't know if anybody else is like this, but my first reaction can be that I don't see it. And usually when she says something to me, I start to see it. But there are times when she explains to me what I've done wrong, and I still don't get it. And it's not that I don't think my heart is necessarily hard. I just think we're very different.
Like when I was giving you directions the other day, and you were so annoyed with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was fun.
That was not fun. No. But there are times when
you ended up going,
I will say that, so we've started working together too, because she's the admin for City Light, and
I explained it like 10 times.
it has become very clear that we communicate. And not that we didn't already know this, but like when we're trying to talk about like stuff I think is just very like
Don't say it.
practical.
You were going to say obvious.
No,
Yeah, you
practical.
were.
No, I would never say that
You're
in front
such
of
a
people.
liar.
No, but we just do communicate so differently, and I'll say it and she'll say it, and it's like, and then we both do this, and it's like our frustration rises, and I'm like, I really think I couldn't say it any clearer, and she's like, I really think I couldn't say it any clearer. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about.
I would never say that though. I wouldn't say it any clearer. That's what you would say.
Yeah, well,
because,
true.
Yeah.
So blindness is one way that I can get in trouble, right? And I don't know if anybody else is like this, where it's not that you're not self-aware, it's that you just you're like, I can't believe that hurt you. Like, I never thought that would hurt you, right? So that's first step, is learning to see it, learning to see stuff from other people's perspective. The other thing that gets in my way is defensiveness. So maybe I see it, but I don't want to admit it. I don't want to admit that what I've done was hurtful. And so you might explain it to me, and then I'm going to explain how you're wrong about how you're feeling, which is, I'm told, not okay.
Well, he's
right?
really good at arguing, and because I'm so easily distracted, I'm like, I kind of forget what we're fighting about, but I know I'm mad and hurt. So, but he's like a conversational wizard, so I'm like, what just happened?
Well, you sometimes have told me that, like, I can make you feel like you're going crazy, because I'll be like, this wasn't okay. You're right, I wasn't okay. And then I'll defend it. I'll be like, but it was okay. But oh, I'm so sorry. But wait, it wasn't wrong.
Yeah, that does make me feel crazy.
Yeah, I love doing that to you.
Not a far trip.
So sometimes I can blame shift. Do you ever do that? That's a part of defensiveness, right? Oh, I was tired, or you didn't hear me right. Right, that's her fault. Or um, it was someone else's fault. There's all this blame shifting. My parents, they just didn't know how to communicate, right? Even if that was true, that's not me owning it. I struggle with defensiveness because here's what I think is happening in my heart is I want you to really understand what I was trying to do and trying to say. And it's super valuable to me. It's like it's important to me to be understood. And so, but my efforts to force you to understand me can come across as me arguing or trying to defeat you. And so I've had to learn to just like sometimes not like fully understand what I've done wrong and be okay with sitting with that for a little while. Um, to own it, to say this is I did this. Help me understand it. Help me understand how that hurt you. Maybe help me understand what I could have done differently. Although I know that can be annoying sometimes too. Um, and then the third kind of negative obstacle is shame. And so sometimes like you get it, like you see it and you admit it, and then you feel terrible. And so what that does is it doesn't allow you to actually face it. When you
I think that's true, especially if like you meant to hurt me or hurt someone else, and maybe you guys feel that way too, is when you've intentionally tried to hurt someone's feelings, like you knew what you were about to say was going to be hurtful. I think then that can be a real obstacle to finding forgiveness because you know that what you did was really wrong.
Yeah,
I think that's like kind of jagged. That's
definitely. Hard. And I think there's another dark side for me is I don't think I do this anymore, but I used to use that shame to get her to take care of me. And so it's turned the victim into the caretaker. It turns the offender into the victim, right? So I'm all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, I'm so terrible. I am a terrible person. I do that all the time. What is my problem? I can't believe I did that again. You're supposed to interrupt me at some point. See, she's learned. And so, like, when we were first married, like that would. And I mean, this happens in friendships though too, doesn't it? And it happens at work, like where you're the one who got hurt, but all of a sudden you're supposed to start taking care of them, and it muddies the waters of victim and I always want to say victim and victor, but that's not right. What's the opposite of victim? Offender? Perpetrator?
I don't know.
Those all seem really harsh.
Yeah.
Abuser?
Victimizer?
Victimizer? That's even worse, Chris. That's terrible. Keep it down back there. Okay, so those are three ways. And obviously, shame is not the way to go, right? Jesus tells us, or Paul tells us in Romans, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So we can see our sin, admit our sin, own our sin. Yes, I did that thing, but we don't have to go into shame. Okay, so now, what are some obstacles to giving forgiveness?
Now we're going to see the real differences in how we relate
Good.
and teach.
You're a storyteller.
Point by point by point. When we were doing this, I was like, I don't know what my points are. I just have all these notes. He was like, okay, let's break it down. It's kind of quiet in here. Okay. Obstacles to forgiving. So I think that for me, I know Christian spoke on this, I think 2 weeks ago, that knee-jerk reaction. So, and what is like your reflex when you're, in an argument or, even confronting someone? What is your knee-jerk reaction and or reflex? And mine is definitely anger. Even if I don't like, or I'm not a yeller. Like I actually hate yelling. So, but like I will internalize it and I'll like just fester and brew and it's really ugly. And
She gets cranky.
really like, it's like so much like a 2-year-old having a tantrum in the grocery store. It's ridiculous. So if I could look at myself while I'm in that, I'd be like, what are you doing? But I'm too thick-headed to see in that moment. So mine is anger. So as soon as Christian or somebody else hurts me, I just usually I'm like, okay, that was not nice. And then it's like I stuff it down and I start to fester and just get really angry about it. And there's this story that you're going to make me think, you're going to think I'm a terrible human, but that's fine. I have a lot of these, and this is actually one of mine that isn't so bad. So if you think bad about me when I tell this story, you might not want to know me any further. So here's an example of how I do this, and I'm not going to throw Christian under the bus because he already threw himself under the bus. So about, I think it's like a week ago, I was in the store, and I just
Was
should.
it Costco, Food Lion, BB's,
I'm not going to say where it was
Acme?
because
We go to the grocery store every day. Does anybody else do that? Nobody else?
that's just because I
Come
can't
on.
remember
All
what
right.
I went there
Yeah.
for.
Right.
And then, yes, I make notes, just whatever. So anyway.
Yesterday we
I-
opened up the trunk of one of our cars.
Oh,
And we found
you are so
we
rude.
found a gallon of milk just
So
sitting in the
rude.
trunk of our car, just like chilling there. Get it? Chilling. But, okay. Sorry. Go ahead. You're not going to tell us what store?
No. And then
It says it right here.
it's
in the
my
notes.
fault. It's my fault because I didn't tell anybody and the mat was curled over it, so no one saw it. I owned that
did.
mistake.
You did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
$2.39 out the window. Okay, here we go. So I was in the store and there was only one clerk. And of course, because if you go anywhere with me in a grocery store, you're guaranteed to have the cart that is the loudest and the line that is the longest. So, and then somebody crazy in front of me will be talking to me about their life story. And I'm like, do I look like I want to talk to you right now? Does this look like a face that wants to have friends? No. So that's Christian. Hi, how are you? We're in line. We might as well talk and get to know each other. I'm like, I don't want any more friends. I don't need any more friends. You stay in your space, I'll stay in mine. Okay. So I was in line and I had a ton of stuff in my arms and the line actually went like halfway down the aisle behind me and it was taking forever. And there was this really, really elderly couple in front of me. They were so cute, but also kind of pitiful. And then, they're just like kind of like, not walking the best. I just felt bad that they had to stand in line so long. And then you can tell that this other clerk is going to start to open her register, right? And so it's like that weird time where you're like, who's going to go over there? It's like, what is his name? Bob Barker. He's like, tell me what you've won. It's like, I feel like there's like going to be a prize, like whose number gets called. And I'm like, it's mine. It's my turn. But I wasn't going to do that, obviously, because there's old people in front of me. So I was like, of course they should go, right? Plus they're next in line. That's how it works. And this person, guys, still makes me mad. This person comes up with one thing in their hands and they're like, oh, are you opening? And then she starts to go. I was like, excuse me. Excuse me. There's a line here. We're all waiting in line. Christian's like, Mandy.
Wait,
I am sorry.
I don't remember
when I
this.
told you the story.
Oh, okay. Like, I wasn't there.
I was like, no. There's a line here. And she was like, oh, you want to go before me? I was like, no, but they can. Like the old people who are, I don't even know how they got here today. They should go. And like, I was like pointing to the line on the aisle. And she's like, well, how many people should go before me? I'm like, everybody.
Oh my gosh.
Do we need to take this outside? I'll
That
put
is
my stuff
so
down. Let's
manipulative.
go. I mean, that is my knee-jerk reaction. I am not a fun person. I mean, like when our kids were little, there would be like inappropriate pictures up on like bookstore walls or whatever, like advertising a book, and I'd be like, take the kids outside. Where's the manager?
More than once.
My kids are like, ugh. But that's just, and some of it is good. Like, I'm sure some of that was like, I just don't like injustice. I don't like it when people step out of line and don't follow the rules. Just follow the rules, people. It's not difficult. Like when you're driving and you're supposed to do the zipper. This makes you really mad. You're just supposed to,
hard.
when you merge, just one in front of the other. And then you have some person just sailing from the back trying to get in. And that's when Christian blocks the lane. And I'm like, we're going to get hit.
Got anybody else? Lane blockers when someone? Yes.
I'm like,
Amen. Yeah.
So that's
It's awesome when you've got a truck, right? Like when you
that's
try to.
my dad's truck.
I don't think he minds. When you've got the Elantra, it looks, and then the horn's like, it's like not as cool.
My dad's going to kill you. All right. So that's just how I respond. It is super unhealthy. I'm not condoning it. And I didn't get into a fight with the lady. She was, she let some people go in front of her. Not as many as she should have, but it's okay. But days later, I'm still mad about it. In fact, I'm probably still mad about it right now. And that's dumb little things like that I have to actually, it's not like it has to be a super big deal for me. I still have to be like, okay, she was wrong. Whatever the reasons are, I still have to forgive her, and that sounds like, Mandy, that's like basic, but I know that you all struggle with things like that too that are really basic. So that's a tiny example. And the verse that I feel like really backs this up is in Psalm. Did you put it up? So good. Psalm 32:5. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgression to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. So, three things in this verse. I'm acknowledging my sin. So, no matter what the context is, whether it's grocery store or, a deep relationship hurt, I have to acknowledge what I've done. And that can also be an obstacle for me because I'm super prideful and I don't like being wrong. I don't like being wrong. Not as much as you don't like being wrong, but
true.
I don't like it. So I have to humble myself, and that's just challenging. I think covering up sin is something that we can easily do, especially when it's in relationships, because it's like you can, as Christian was saying, blame shift that, and you can say, well, that's just how they relate to people, or that's just who they are, or they're never going to say they're sorry, and their response is going to be da 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 da, right? And so, but see, God's not asking that. He's saying, you acknowledge it, you don't cover up your sin. And then there's this beautiful point of confession where first we have to confess it to God because our forgiveness truly comes from him, and so we need to confess whatever it is and knowing that he is faithful and just to forgive. And it says, you forgave the guilt of my sin. And I think that's just really powerful that we don't have to keep living in that we can grow. Hopefully I can grow in this and I won't have any. I mean, if you see me in the paper, I don't know what to tell you. Just come visit me in prison. I don't know. But yes, I also have to forgive myself too. The guilt of the sin. I stayed on track.
That was really good.
I know.
All right,
so
so
proud of myself.
time check. We have 15 minutes left.
I'm good.
Okay. So the second thing we talk about is how to. So how to. So there's obstacles on both sides, right? And we all have those obstacles. So how do we do it? How do we seek forgiveness? How do we give forgiveness? So for my part, I love the Psalms when it comes to sin. This is another good one. I know the transgressions, for I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, Lord, have I sinned. You only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. And what I love about that verse is the total and complete ownership and the lack of excuses, the lack of explaining it away. So here are just 3 quick tips for seeking forgiveness. I'm trying to seek forgiveness. Number 1, I need to seek to understand it. When our kids were little, we would tell them to say they were sorry, and they would say, I'm sorry, like to their sibling, and I'd be like, okay, hold on. What are you sorry for? I don't know. That doesn't count, right? That doesn't help, right? So she's telling me I hurt her, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, and I don't understand that it's really not as meaningful. So I need to hear from you. If I've hurt you, I need to let myself, and it's not let you beat me up, but I need to hear from you your hurt. I need to receive that and understand it, right? Seek to understand, not just listen, but seek to understand. How did it hurt you? I want to know, I want you to talk to me about the pain that it caused you, what it made you feel, what it made you think about me, so that if I can really understand it, then I can really apologize for it. And we'll get to this in a little bit, but it'll also help me to change. I need to name it and own it. So when I ask for forgiveness, I try to very specifically say what I'm asking forgiveness for, right? I'm sorry that I cut you out of the conversation, right? I'm sorry that I interrupted you so much. I'm sorry. And this is from listening and understanding that because here's the deeper thing, is I made you feel unimportant around the table. I made you feel unimportant in our family. I made you feel like what you had to say wasn't as important as what everyone else had to say. That's really where the hurt is. It's not so much about the interrupting, although that's annoying, right? So I need to listen to hear that so that then I can name it. I did that. Like I didn't mean to do that, but I can see how my actions made you feel that way, okay? And the other part just to keep in mind is you can only do your part when you're seeking forgiveness. So you can't, ooh, that was cool. You can't force someone to forgive them. So I'm only responsible for my side of this equation. I can't be also responsible for her side of the equation, right? So if she walks in unforgiveness towards me, that great verse that says, do everything you can to live at peace with all people. Do everything you can. That's it. You can't do more than that. So I can't force it to happen. So there's a time when you've done all you can and you've put the ball in their court. And if they want to walk in bitterness and unforgiveness, that's on them, between them and the Lord. So you stay right with God and you do your best to stay right with others, but you can't own that. You can't own the fact that they haven't received your forgiveness or given you forgiveness. Okay? All right. So now we're talking a little bit about how to give forgiveness. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
You gonna click it?
Do you want me to do the next one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Nice. Okay. So I really love this. I was telling Christian, I was like, I don't know that I can explain forgiveness without sharing a passage in the Bible, just because I don't feel that I do this perfectly so that I'm like an example. So I as you can see, it's Luke 23:32 through 43. And for those of you who, have been in faith for a long time, you're familiar with this passage about Jesus going to die on the cross. And for those of you who aren't, so Jesus is in the middle, and on either side are hanging two criminals. And so there's three crosses. And, being crucified obviously was one of the most horrible ways to die, as you're basically, the weight of your body is coming down. You can barely talk. If you want to talk, you have to push from your feet to be able to get any kind of air or breath. And the fact, like, when I read that, like, what happens to someone's body when they're crucified, if you actually read that, for me, it made this passage so much more powerful, because this is with all that they really have, that they're expressing love and forgiveness and sacrifice. So it starts out saying, two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him, Jesus, to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And so here we already see that Jesus is saying he forgives the people who are punishing him for a crime that obviously he has not committed. And I think that for me is just, that's an example that obviously if I'm mad at the lady in the store cutting in line, I have a lot to grow in. So, he's forgiving not only the people who are doing this to him, but he's also forgiving, the people next to him. And it's very, very powerful that he in that moment is doing that. Verse 35 says, "The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, 'He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one.'" Here I really feel like this verse points out that people don't always understand why you were forgiving. And so when he's saying, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. People might look at you, especially as a believer, and say, that person really hurt you deeply. Why do you even talk to them anymore? I've had people ask me this about certain relationships. Why do you even reach out to them anymore? They are so rude to you. They're always mean to you. They don't respect your boundaries. And it's just like,
Are people talking to you about me? That's really rude. Who says that about me? I want to know. So mean.
I'm like, what's this thing? No, I'm just kidding. No, and I, all I can say is it's really not me. It's God, and it's his love for that person too. But I'm not saying to do that in relationships that, of course, are not safe, or where you've been abused or really hurt. I'm not saying you need to continue relationship in those things, but there may come a time in your life when, you can actually have a relationship with the person that is actually going to hurt your feelings. And you're like, that's okay. Like, it's going to be like water rolling off a duck's back, right? Like, I can handle that. It's more important for me to still be in their life and have relationship with them. So I think that this speaks really powerfully to that. And verse 36, "The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, 'If you are the king of Jews, save yourself.' There was written a notice above him which read, 'This is the King of the Jews.'" And then I'm going to get later on, when we talk about people offending us, I'm going to talk about this one criminal who comes at Jesus. But I'm going to skip down for a minute to verse 40, where it says, "But the other criminal rebuked him, saying, 'Don't you fear God?' He said, 'since you're under the same sentence.'" So we're all here hanging on the cross together. The one prisoner is basically just mocking Jesus still. And the other criminal is saying, "We are punished justly for what we are getting, what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." And so, again, when Christian was saying, there has to come a point where we recognize what we are doing is wrong. And I think that this passage just shows how beautiful it is that when he's literally hanging on a cross next to Jesus, and he has led a life or had egregious acts that have gotten him to a cross. So we don't know when he believed that Jesus was the Messiah, but ultimately he did. And in that moment, he realizes who he is next to, and I think that's part of what I was just saying, the love that I have for some of those people in my life who I can still have boundaries with and relationship with, is because I don't know when they're going to have their, come to Jesus moment. And it's really powerful if you can still extend that love to them. And so, yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about that. You can go ahead with your next point.
Okay.
I'm gonna not talk about that next.
Okay. Wow.
I know.
Self-control.
I know. I'm growing.
Okay.
Right here in front of you.
So good. Hopefully that's a little bit of it, and it's all stuff we know, right? Like when you talk about stuff like this, we all know this, but it's the doing that really matters, right? It's the humbling of myself and listening and confessing, and it's really humbling to forgive someone too. It's like a two-way street, like a humbling of yourself to give that forgiveness away.
Well, I don't, and this is just me, maybe you can relate with this. Like, I don't like it. Of course, when Christian would hurt my feelings, I know I hurt his too, but I want to just be the person who's just like, it's okay, just don't worry about it. Like, I know, I forgive you, of course, like, I love you, like, just don't worry about it. Instead of me thinking, like, did that actually really hurt my feelings? And taking a minute, because I just want to be, I want to be like Jesus, and I want to just forgive and forgive and forgive. But I think that sometimes that can get in the way too, where it's just that, like, it's actually okay to be hurt. Like, we're all humans, and it's okay to be hurt too.
Right. And I mean, Jesus, he didn't just brush things away. He actually called sin,
Right.
and was just about it to the point where it cost him his life. So he wouldn't need to die on the cross if he was just like, no big deal, right? But he calls sin, and then chooses to forgive. And I think that's really important, and something that's been helpful in my growth in our relationship is you telling me what actually hurts and why. That helps me a lot to be motivated to change then.
I clearly have no problem telling people when they're doing something wrong. Get back in line.
Now, you paint yourself in a harsher light than most people know you. So I think
You're okay.
You're a lot nicer than you say that you are.
Sure.
Created me okay, so I just start reading for no reason. So the third and final point is what to do after. So let's say you've gotten through your barriers of forgiveness and you've asked forgiveness, you've received forgiveness. Now, as the person who has hurt the person, what do I have any other jobs? And I like more of Psalm 51. Create in me a pure heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence. Restore to me the joy of my salvation. My salvation.
You did.
That's weird. And grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I will teach transgressors. So I will help other people out, right? I will teach transgressors your ways, so sinners will turn back to you. My sacrifice, God, is a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. God, you will not despise. And so that is that sense of humility, but also that sense of, I want to move on from here and grow because of this. So something that if you've been alive for a while, you realize that you don't just make a mistake once and then you never make it again. We tend to make the same mistakes. And so the ways that I hurt people they're not news to me. Like, if you tell me I've hurt you in some way, I can put it in a couple buckets and I know, like, this is one of the ways that I hurt people. And so I'm trying to grow in those areas. So I think a question we have to ask ourselves is this a pattern? Okay. So is this a pattern in my life? Was it a one-time weird thing? Like, those do happen. But if you find, like, this is a pattern in my life, this is maybe a character issue for me, then we need to be willing to do the work, to grow, to be the person God's called us to be. And that's why Christine's leading this relationship class. Go there today and she will fix everything that's wrong in your life, okay? Um, no, but we have to be willing to do the work, and the work might be reading a book about it. The work might be getting therapy. The work might be, going to classes at church. It might be getting a mentor in your life. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do, but like, don't stay stuck. God's plan for us is to make us a new creation in Christ, for us to be growing and becoming more loving and more joyful and more peace filled and less of a record keeper, right? Like, God wants us to grow. And so when I have found patterns in my life, they all take work. And one of the things that helps me, just to say one more thing, is when you are honest, when you do the hard work of being the forgiver, that helps the people who need to be forgiven grow. Because if you just gloss it over, brush it under the rug, then that doesn't help me grow at all. But when you're honest with me and you tell me why it hurt and how it hurt, then I can grow, because that helps me see myself through someone else's eyes. And it helps me acknowledge, okay, this must be something I do. This must be something I do wrong. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person who cuts people off, right? I don't want to be that person who looks busy all the time and doesn't have time for you. I don't want to be that person who's in a conversation, but you can tell I'm only halfway there because I'm already on to the next one. Like, these are all my problems, and I have more. I don't want to be that person who responds.
Like, those are not all your problems.
Those are a few of my problems. We're just scratching the surface. So I think admitting when it's a pattern and then getting the work done, getting help doing the work, is really important. So on the other side of that coin.
Don't look at your watch and then smile.
I know. 5 minutes.
So rude. I can do it. All right. So repeat offenders. Let's visit that again, and we'll visit this part of the passage that I went over. So I think that it's, when you look at that imagery of Jesus in the middle and then the one criminal who is asking for forgiveness in that last moment of agonizing pain, recognizing their wrong and what they've done, and wanting to be free of sin and death. I think that we have the stark difference, right, on the other side, where the other criminal is hurling insults still at Jesus, right? I think that, to me, that speaks volumes, because you can still have people in your life that you are trying to be like Jesus and extend that forgiveness, and you are willing to, and it's like you're willing to sacrifice, you're willing to, and not that we are Jesus, but like if you put yourself in that position, like, I'm here, like, I'm willing to work this out, I'm willing to talk to you, I'm willing to sacrifice. All those things are in place, but the person is still spewing hate towards you, just like we see, right? In verse 39, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. His heart is like so hardened.
Totally different.
It's just their responses to who Jesus is completely different. And there will be people in your lives and in my life who are never going to ask for forgiveness. And that's really hard. I kind of equate it to what the Vineyard calls the now and the not yet, is what the Vineyard says, because we're living here in the broken, and in the now. And we see the healing and we see what God has for us, all that restoration, but that's not yet. That's not until heaven. And that is not just, in physical healing, that's also in like relationship healing too. We may never see that relationship restored here. And that's really challenging for me. It's really challenging for me when I know that I'm doing everything I can to live peaceably with others. It's really difficult for me when I feel like I've checked my heart and I've asked for forgiveness, but yet there's just this hate and there's this constant, like, I don't want you in my life and I just don't know what else to do. And somewhere there has to be that letting go. You don't see Jesus here trying to convince the criminal. You don't see him trying to convince him, like, don't you want to be with me too? He's still open to that. It's not like he chose one or the other. The two are both in sin. And what's amazing, the imagery here, is that it's Jesus is standing in the middle. Like, he's standing in the gap already. And he's saying, I'm here, So we have a choice to extend forgiveness. We also have a choice to know when that forgiveness is just never going to be heard. And we have to somehow get okay with that. There's a verse in Matthew 5:4 that says, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, Do good for those who hate you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. And so I think that for me, that verse is just so challenging, but I think it represents what Jesus did on the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're all of these enemies. Of course, they're not his enemies, they're his children. And he's forgiving them. So if he's called to that kind of love, then I need to love my enemies. I need to be blessing those who I know are actively cursing me and spewing hate about me. Do good to those who hate you. Not only do I bless them, I'm supposed to find something good that I can do for them or to them. And if I can't have a relationship with them, maybe that is the next. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. I know there have been times when I have been used in my life, and Christian will say, they're using you. And I will say, yes, I know, but I'm choosing to lay that down, and I'm still going to serve them and bless them. I'm not an idiot. I know when I'm being used. But it's that shift. It's that choice to say, even in that, I'm going to choose to bless. So maybe in your relationships, you can think of one specifically where that person is going to just keep spewing hate, and you will still be like Jesus, and you will still be willing to extend that forgiveness. You will still be available for them, but it is up to them at some point. It is up to them, and it is their choice, just like the other criminal chose.
Yeah. And you can draw boundaries in your heart around how much you give of yourself, because there are people who maybe aren't spewing hate, but keep sinning against you in the same way.
Right.
And you can tell they're not doing the work to get that pattern corrected in their life. Yeah. And if you keep just making yourself completely vulnerable, you're just going to keep getting hurt. So I love what you're saying. That's really wise.
Duh.
All right. So worship team, you guys can come up, and yeah, so different format, but we hope this was helpful. And our heart is that each of us can see each of you can see yourself in here somewhere, right? And you can be like, there's a piece I could work on. And then if you're good friends with somebody else, you can be like, hey, there's a piece you could work on, right? No, don't do that.
I was like, are you really saying that?
No.